I'm a little bit worried that when some of you hear this gospel today especially, you think to yourself, I better not sit at the front of the church. Those front pews, stay away from them. They're for bad people, prideful people, like that Pharisee. But instead, when I walk into an empty church, I'll immediately go to the very last pew so that I can be like the tax collector who Jesus praises in this gospel. Let me tell you, that's not the meaning of the gospel, right? If you're doing that, you're not following the words of Jesus. That's not what he means here. He has something very different in mind. In this parable that he tells, this story, he speaks about this Pharisee who comes in and we can imagine stands up in front of everyone and gives praise to God, but for all the wrong reasons. He comes in and he boasts of himself. I am so great. I pray a lot, and he goes through all the things. I keep the fast twice a week. I'm generous with my money. I give my tithe, all of these things. He's doing all the right things, but for all the wrong reasons. He's doing them so others will notice, so others will look upon him and think well of him. He's doing it to satisfy his own ego and his own pride. Whereas the tax collector, is he doing all of those good things? Probably not, right? Tax collectors were generally seen as people who were pretty bad people. He too may have been a very prideful man. It's quite possible. But yet, when he comes to the church, to the synagogue on this day, he stays at the back, yes, but he enters the church with great humility. And he says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. He's not there for other people. He's not there for his own ego, his own self-centeredness, but he's there for God. He has a contrite heart. He recognizes and acknowledges what he's done that is wrong. He's able to see it. Why? Because of his humility, which pierces his pride and allows him to see his soul as God sees his soul. And because of that, he kneels down and he begs God for mercy. How can it be with that Pharisee, the first one? How can it be that he has so little self-awareness? How can it be that he doesn't see things rightly, whereas this tax collector is able to? His heart, it seems, is full of pride, and humility is not able to pierce his heart to allow him to truly see. Over my time here so far, I know I've mentioned a number of times, but I've been meeting with a bunch of you, and you've been sharing with me some of your stories of your life and the stories of your faith and the blessings that God has given to you, the places where you have seen him. And for me too, over this last while, that's been going through my mind a lot. And I've been thinking then of myself too, of the blessings of God in my own life, reflecting on my whole life and just kind of looking back. And it's great when you look back, you can see the fingerprints of God everywhere, right? Maybe in the moment we don't notice, but certainly afterwards we can see, and it's amazing to do that. But along with that, we see all the good and the blessings, but there's also the bad things too, right? I look back over my life and I see sometimes how long it's taken me to do some things, and why did it take that long? Where I've been paralyzed or in chains. I see my own kind of life of sin, and sometimes making progress, but other times not making progress, just kind of feeling a little bit stuck. I look back too, at my own confessions a little bit, right? Going each week for that Holy Sacrament of confession. And what I notice is something a little bit disturbing. Maybe you do as well. That a lot of the time it's kind of the same stuff that I'm confessing. What does that mean? What is that saying? Does it mean that I'm stagnant or that I'm not moving or that God doesn't care about me? What does that really mean? I mean, every once in a while I'll come up with something really good, right? And I'll try to surprise my confessor. Look what I've done, it's really good. And maybe he'll be shocked, right? Hopefully not. But often it's kind of the same kind of thing. What does that mean? What does that mean? And reflecting on it more and more, this is what I've come to, and reflecting on some of the teachings of the church that I know that I've heard before, but now have a new meaning in my own life. That's what I want to share with you today. what I want to share with you is this. I think it's normal for us to struggle with similar sins in our own lives, right? Each of us has our strengths, our own unique particular strengths, our gifts, and we also have our own unique particular faults, our own unique particular points of weakness. And it's normal that even throughout most of our lives that we will struggle with particular weaknesses, particular temptations. One of the teachings that comes from our Catholic tradition, which I think is very helpful, it's something I've been thinking about a lot for myself and that I have found helpful, and I want to throw it out there for you as well. It's the teaching that we have of the predominant fault. The idea is this, just that for each of us, we have our own particular weak points, our own particular weaknesses. And if you trace back sin in your life, you can trace it back through its root to the very foundation, right? And so if you can do that, if you can trace back your sin, if you can follow the common ground, if you can follow that thread and find that root cause, that's the thing to go after. That's the area where we need healing and strength. We can work around at the surface, but if you healed at the root, it's truly healed. If we allow Christ to redeem us to the root, to the core, then we are truly redeemed. We know, right, with medicine, that you can go to the doctor, I'm sick, give me some drugs, right? And they may just give you some drugs that cover the side effects, that make up for the side effects, and I don't feel as drowsy or whatever it is, right? And that's, I guess that's good, right? We enjoy that. But it's much better if you can say, doctor, cure me at the root of the problem. Fix it right at the root. Make it go away so it will never come back, so that it's healed truly. For us, the idea of the predominant fault is this idea, to heal it at the root. The idea goes back even to original sin, right? If you imagine original sin, the fall of Adam and Eve, it had real consequences. We read about them in the book of Genesis, but also spiritual consequences. You can imagine there's, for each of us, spiritually, there's a fault line running through each of our souls. And that fault line runs a little bit differently in each of us. And so what that means is that each of us will struggle in different ways. For some of us, maybe like greed is no problem, right? But for others, it's a big problem. It's something they really struggle with. It's not necessarily their fault. It's just that's where their fault line runs. And that's what they need to strive to overcome in their life here in this world. How do we overcome it? What do we do with these things? In our tradition, the church narrows down these 7 roots. You can narrow down all sin, all temptation, all discord, all struggle in our life at the end of the day to basically to these 7 capital sins. You may have heard of them before, or the 7 deadly sins. These are the 7 roots of all that is bad in our lives. And for each of us, we may struggle with all of them in one way or another. But for each of us, one of them in particular is the real root, is the root of the things that plague us. Those 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, anger, sloth, greed, gluttony, lust. For us, it's a good thing, and I've been trying to do this, and it surprised me what I've come to for myself. Just praying and asking God, Lord, show me my predominant fault. Show me where that fault line is, so that then I can overcome it. Then I can ask for your help. Then I can seek out healing right at the root of the problem. For the church, she offers remedies, antidotes to each of these capital sins, each of these possibilities for our predominant fault. When we think of pride, right? Pride. We remember the Pharisee in the gospel today. Someone who is seemingly very prideful. He's wanting everyone else to notice him. He's self-centered. He's egotistical. He's doing it for all the wrong reasons. What does he need? The readings today point out very clearly. He needs humility to pierce his heart, to allow him to see properly, to allow him to see through his pride, his ego, and to see truly and rightly. And so for us, if we notice that I struggle with pride, that's at the root, at the end of the day. It's not a judgment. It's not saying you're a terrible person. How could you struggle with pride? What's wrong with you? It's just acknowledging the truth. For me, for my soul, that fault line, it runs through pride. And so what that then means for the rest, probably for the rest of your life, like this is a spiritual fault line. It's deep. For the rest of our lives, that's where we should be focusing the most energy and attention on trying to be humble, to attain the virtue of humility. When we come to Mass each Sunday, we pray and ask Jesus for humility. When we read the Gospels, we look especially for those parts that speak to humility. When we go to confession, we're especially aware, where wasn't I humble? Because that's the root. Fix that, and you're fixed, and you're truly healed by the power of God. Envy. What about envy? We think of envy as looking out towards other people. What do they think of me? Is there something they have that I really want, or I just wish that they didn't have it? Right? I want them to suffer because I don't want them to be better than I am, and all of these kinds of things. The antidote, the remedy to that, is kindness and admiration. So, what are ways that I can introduce and try even more to be really kind and to speak many words of admiration and affirmation towards others? Reversing, looking out towards others in fear. They have something I don't have, but instead looking out and just admiring without holding anything in our hearts of envy. Anger. What if it's anger? We know, right? For some people, they have a really fiery personality. Not to blame them, it's not like, but it's the truth. For them, what is their life's work? Their life's work is trying to temper that anger and also to be quick to forgive others so that it doesn't stoke that fire of anger. What we notice with each of these, right? With each of these, that all of the saints, they weren't special in the sense that they were free from faults or from temptations or their own particular weaknesses. What makes the saints special is that they recognized them and they overcame them. They struggled with them often for their whole lives. We think of anger and that kind of fire, that fiery spirit. And we think of St. James, right, in the Gospel. There's a story where Jesus went to a town and he was not welcome. The people didn't listen. And what does James say? Lord, do you want me to call down fire from heaven to destroy the whole town? A little bit of an overreaction, right? From someone not being nice to you or not welcoming you. But yet, there he is. And then you read later on the letters and you read more about James. And you see there's a real development. There's a real spiritual change that happens in him. Sloth, idleness, a kind of spiritual laziness, not taking seriously the call to prayer and to follow God closely every day. For some, that can be a real struggle. For them, the antidote is a kind of diligence, greater zeal, work, like discipline, every day being faithful to Christ. If you know that, if that's your weakness, focus right there every day on doing good things, action, following God faithfully each and every day. Greed, if we mainly see things through that sinful lens of greed, then we need to rework our sight so that we can be people of great charity and great generosity, making sure that we're giving away lots, kind of reforming and shaping our souls. Gluttony, the opposite, the opposing virtue being temperance and self-restraint. And lust, the counter virtues being chastity and holy purity. These are so important, right? Because what's at stake in the fight against lust and impurity is love. It's trying to destroy true love, trying to destroy our ability to love authentically. We notice St. Augustine, right? He prays, he says, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet, right? That this was something he struggled with. Other saints, we read about them. When temptation come, they would roll around in the snow. They would throw themselves into a rose bush. They were trying diligently to overcome their particular weakness. for each of us. This is what I want to throw out there today for you to think about, and maybe just not for today or this week, but it's probably a longer term thing. Just reflecting for yourself the patterns that you see in your own life, in your own kind of dysfunction, right? To have the courage to look into that and to see, where's the root? Where do I really need healing and strength? What area do I really need to be praying for? And then what are those positive virtues that I can strive for diligently each day in my life to help to heal and to overcome that particular weakness? For us, what's at stake in all of this is we are called to be images of Jesus. We're called to be imitators of Jesus, another Christ, Christ himself. And it's not enough. It's not enough just for us to say, I'm a nice person. You're a nice person. That's great, right? Be nice. But when we want to get serious about being like Christ, this is what we need to do. This is how deep we need to dig. This is how deep the healing, the strength, the power, the grace of God can dig into our souls and to heal us, to renew us, to give us new life in Jesus.